Hi, thank you everyone for joining today as we're going to talk about the best tactics when negotiating Microsoft Office 365 offerings today. This is something I'm sure a lot of you folks are struggling with. It's really a complex offering and Microsoft does their best to be confusing. We're going to try to cut through that, understand what you need to do to be successful in negotiation to drive the costs out while maintaining compliance. So here at MetrixData 360, we have really three core offerings that we have. One is managed SAM services, and what we do there is we actually combine people, tools, and process to basically create a turnkey solution where you understand exactly what's deployed on your systems, you understand what your license entitlements are. We pull that together to create ELPs. This makes true-up events, be they Microsoft or other vendors, very easy, and we couple that with expert advice so that all the licenses are optimized and you're basically just buying exactly what you need specific to your situation. We also defend folks who find themselves in a software audit situation. We work with most major vendors, and vendors are getting more and more aggressive. We're seeing them come after folks about once every 3 years. And these are really designed to create, from a vendor perspective, software publisher, these are really designed to create revenue. What we do is we help take that, free up your time and resources, and we try really dramatically reduce the cost. The other thing we do is we assist folks who are negotiating a major software contract, be it Microsoft, Adobe, IBM, to help really drive the cost out of those. We average about a 25 to 30% cost reduction, and we help make sure your folks are informed and making the right decisions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to completely change the game on Microsoft. I'll tell you a little bit about us and where I come from so you can understand why you may want to listen to us. Our folks, just about everybody in our organization carried a bag at Microsoft at one point or another, whether they were a licensing executive, a licensing specialist, in the audit team, an account manager, and we kind of understand how they think and what they're doing. And really what we want to do is kind of turn this on their heads. They have a playbook they're going to try to deploy against you. And the key thing to an Office 365 negotiation is to have a long runway. Get out ahead of this. And the reason you want to get ahead of this is it's important to understand how Microsoft is thinking. So if you're currently not on Office 365 today, they are going to do everything they can to move you there. And so they have over, probably right now as I record this, it's May, probably sometime last year, if you've got a June renewal or coming up, they'll be doing some internal meetings. And what they'll be doing is kind of creating a series of models internally for what your renewal will look like. And it'll be, basically an aspirational model, because if you look at the final bullet point there, this is kind of how they set their quota internally. They're looking at your last year's spend, and this is your annual payments, your true-ups, your non-EA purchases, and they're adding roughly a 1.2 multiplier. That can change a bit, but really they're looking to drive about a 20% growth number on you. The only way to do that for most organizations is to get you to buy more product, move you, if you're on an E3 now, move you to an E5. Basically move you from an on-prem to Office 365, drive these costs out. But what you want to start doing in terms of getting ahead of that message is you want to have clear communication with Microsoft. Make sure your whole team is on deck with this. You want to communicate your challenges. You want to reduce your costs. You've got issues with with the way they license. And I'm not saying you have compliance issues, but there's issues probably in everyone's organization where they experience frustrations with the way Microsoft licenses their products that don't make sense in their environment. You want to communicate that. If there's shortfalls in how the technology works, you want to communicate that. Roadmap and deployment challenges, this is critical. You don't want to buy things that you can't deploy. So you want to make that loud and clear that you're not doing this. Another tactic that Microsoft likes to use is that when they move you to these new bundles, these increased levels, they want to rip and replace some third-party product. In the past, it might have been security offerings, maybe it's encryption, maybe it's whatever. But they want to displace those costs and put it against yours without really giving you the time to actually really do the due diligence to make sure you understand what you're doing. But also one of the key parts in this, and it's going to vary from organization to organization depending on how you're structured, but have your team clearly defined. Often we see kind of a triangle of legal, finance, and IT procurement. Make sure the roles are understood, but everyone is on the same page in terms of the messaging. We don't want to get inconsistent messaging going out to the Microsoft account team, and then they use that to kind of divide and conquer. So as we get a little closer, we're now 6 to 9 months out to renewal. The first bullet point there is going to be very important through this whole presentation. You're going to hear me say this over and over again. Knowing what you don't need is more important than knowing what you do need. So you want to make sure you know what you don't need. we're going to get into this in quite a bit of detail, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But they're going to try to sell you a huge bundle of products, and there's going to be a whole bunch of things bundled in that you're going to look at and go, we don't need that. You need to be able to cross that out. I'm going to show you how to do that. So one of the steps you can take is understand your deployment roadmap for the next 12 to 18 months. And I can't stress this enough. You want to be conservative. You want to map it out. You want to have internal discussions where you debate it and validate it. You don't want to have anything aspirational, anything aggressive. You want to be conservative. Then you want to solidify with Microsoft what your deployment roadmap looks like. Share that if it's something that's not mission critical or something that's not, what's the word I'm looking for, that you cannot share. But try to share that because it gives them the ammunition they need to go back and lower their forecast, because they're going to be stuck on that number that they put together quite a while. And if the deployment numbers don't map up, and if your business challenges don't map up, you want to make sure you're giving that message so they can get their forecast brought down. You also want to continue to talk about those deployment challenges, technology challenges, if there's any other things in your industry, in the business, if perhaps business is not growing the way you'd hoped, things like that. You want to make sure that's communicated early and loud to them. We're now getting into the 3 to 6 month window. And you want to kind of start communicating 2 or 3 options to Microsoft that you're considering. And what you want to see, because they're going to put a couple of proposals together for you out of the gate. And what they're going to provide to you is they're going to provide to you a renewal of same, which is essentially whatever you've got today, continuing along that path. And then they're going to have 2 or 3 what I'll call Microsoft aspirational proposals. If you're not in the cloud, these are ones that you're going to move to the cloud. And then they'll have a couple different tiers with E3, E5. And then if you already are in the cloud, they're going to see aspirational proposals where they're moving you from like an E3 to an E5. So that's where they're going to start. You're going to want to see a couple of different things. So they're going to show those to you. Now, I'm also going to mention one of the things they're going to do is any discounting that they provide is really going to be on those cloud offerings. You're not going to see much discount on a traditional perpetual license on-prem. So what you want to do is communicate you want to get a quote that looks like what your bare minimum requirements. And what this is really what's the bare minimum that you need to purchase from Microsoft and maintain software compliance. So this is kind of really bringing it right down to the floorboard so you understand where the floor is. You want to make sure that you communicate real clearly. We're doing these deployment plan. This is what our deployment looks like. So if we're moving to Office 365, we don't want to pay for everything up front. We want to ramp in. And what I mean by this is Microsoft is, if they're moving you to the cloud, they're going to want to move your entire environment onto an E3 or E5 SKU day one. That's not realistic for most of you. Most of you are going to ramp in. You're going to have a subset of users are going to move into that over a period of time. You want to make sure you have evidence that wraps out to that, and so that you can communicate that. Now, you also want to understand the value gap. And what this is the Microsoft forecast minus your actual needs is the value gap. And we want to really get through this. And you want to start the negotiation, start communicating this to Microsoft. Don't be concerned if you don't feel you're 100% ready, you don't know all your needs, but get started with this part. Now we're getting into about 3 months in, so the negotiation is getting pretty serious. You want to push Microsoft hard, and don't worry about harming your relationship. I mean, this can be done particularly if we're talking about deployment numbers and things like that. This can be done in a very respectful fashion. You want to do that, and you want to keep asking for the same things over and over again if they're saying no. The example we kind of use here is like a child who's asking for a treat, and they keep asking again and again and again and again, and eventually give in. You almost need to do that. It's not sophisticated, but that sometimes works with them. And just make sure that you negotiate the deal that works for you. You control this, not Microsoft, and negotiate off. Don't negotiate, negotiate into their weaknesses, not into their strengths. And I'm going to show you how to do that. One of the most critical things you can do to enter into negotiation when you've got that runway is understand your own data. And by this, what I mean by understanding your own data is have a really solid understanding of your deployment numbers, have an understanding of, what your current licensing structure looks like versus the deployment numbers, understand how your end users are using the technology today. So maybe do some user profiling exercises. Maybe you've got some folks that Microsoft would call knowledge worker, where an E3, E5 SKU makes a lot of sense. Maybe you've got another subset of users. Maybe they're factory workers. Maybe they're healthcare professionals who access technology predominantly through a kiosk. Well, that's a different type of licensing. So one of the things that we think is important is to have that good, clean data before you start and understand that process. Because that way you're armed with the evidence you need when you're talking to Microsoft. And to that, we have a series of tools we like to use. We can certainly utilize any tools that you have. We like using a tool called Certero. And what Certero does, it's part of our SAM Compass offering, where we really pull everything together. This tool is a next level platform. What's kind of unique about it compared to a lot of the other asset management tools that are out there is when we look at the other tools, and we've been exposed to pretty much all of them, they really become almost like a Frankenstein creation where various things are bolted onto them over time. What Certero did is they actually had another product, and they took this particular product offline for roughly 3 years while they rebuilt it completely on a new platform and made it completely cloud ready. And so this is really a next generation platform. When we saw it, we were just blown away by this. The other neat thing about this tool is it's completely cloud ready. So you can see here the Asset Studio for cloud. It's tracking your Office 365 usage, how you're getting to this. Microsoft likes to make the usage as difficult to get to as possible, so you don't really understand what your users are using. And this gets really critical, particularly once you've moved to the cloud and you're negotiating that next contract, so you understand what your usage is. But we also handle Salesforce, Adobe Creative Cloud, Amazon, Azure, and pretty much all sorts of SaaS applications. This just gives you a sense of what the screenshots look like, great graphical interface, which provides great management reports you're looking for. And this is highly, highly customizable, just a widget, really easy to build. And this is one of the last ones of these, but visibility across all the platforms and virtualization. So you'll see everything from, desktop to mobile to virtualization to cloud. It's all pretty much laid out there, and we have full coverage. So I'm going to talk now. I've talked to you a lot about the importance of knowing what you don't need. Now I'm going to show you what I really mean by this. But first off, it's important to kind of take a look at this slide. This is our Office 365 decision model. And it's kind of there's 3 big bubbles there that define your business requirements that are identified, your costs, your deployment plan, roadmap developed. There's a series of numbers kind of where those balloons intersect. And if you're in where number 1 is, you've got a lack of TCO, no financial justification to move forward. If you're in number 2, so you've got your costs and business requirements identified, you really don't have timelines for deployments. If you're in, 3, you've got deployment plan costs, but you don't really have a business case. Really where you want to be before you consider moving to Office 365 is in 4, where you've got a combination of these business requirements, you've got the cost justified, and the deployment plan. I mean, this is kind of, on one hand, this is a fairly simple diagram, but on the other hand, it's very, very powerful in that it really gives you a good sense of, of really where you need to be. And I think it's important to check back to this periodically and make sure, if you're considering Office 365, that you are in that, that magic 4th kind of part of the bubble before you consider moving forward. So I'm going to show you something here, which is kind of how Microsoft positions the product. My screen's going to jump for a second, so I pull up an Excel document. So hopefully everyone can see this. And what I want to show you here, and it's a bit of an eye chart, but what I want to show you here is Microsoft has here the traditional bundles and what's included in the various bundles. So, you look at, an E3, here's E5, here's the additional stuff it has. Here are all the various products that are inside those various bundles. So I want you to take a hard look at those. And what you need to do is take a look at this and start going, do I actually need all of these pieces, or do I just need a couple of them? And the reason I say this, Microsoft doesn't like to publicize this. All of these products can be bought a la carte. And when they're bought a la carte, they have a different price point. Not all of these products, like for instance, Windows 10 Enterprise, does not have the same value as a SQL Server account. They all have a different value. If you can kind of do a profiling exercise and work through this, you might be able to kind of mix and match. You can put a subset of your users on an E3 or an E5. And maybe you're buying a whole lot of your people really just need to exchange online because they're accessing via kiosks. I mean, that's a simple example, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. So this is very customizable as long as you get out of the Microsoft bundle. And I just want to make sure you understand that. We can go into more detail on this, kind of offline. So if folks are interested in this, just reach out to myself and we'll be happy to go through this in a much more comprehensive fashion. But really what you want to do is you want to sit there. Charts like this can be found on the internet. You want to sit there and really, if you're with your Microsoft, just cross things off that you're not using. You want to take a black pen and just cross them off and then give them back a piece of paper and say, I want a price just on what I need. What does that look like? You might be surprised at what you get back. Let's see if I can get my PowerPoint back without crashing everything. I did. So now is the interesting one that some of you are probably in, which is when you're negotiating your second Office 365 deal. So you've sold yourself dearly into the cloud because you only get to go once. You did that 3 years ago, roughly. You've made that move and you negotiated hard. Now you're coming up for renewal. The bad news is it's going to be more difficult because Microsoft thinks they have you. You're in the cloud. So I think the important thing here is it's going to be data, data, data. This is so critical. And this is where, again, that tool that I talked about, Certero, that we sell in the SAM Compass service, is really understanding how are you actually using it. This kind of eye chart you see on the right here, this is actually one of the usage reports that are inside of the Office 365 console. So you can actually understand how your users are actually using the product and which pieces that they're using. Because once you have a clear understanding of that, and to be clear, this view that you see on the screen, it'll be different for different customers. Some of the interfaces are slightly different. So if it doesn't look exactly like this, don't panic. Your product mix may be different. Sometimes they can change this without notice, but they certainly do not make it easy to surface this information. And they don't want you to be particularly informed about this, but you want to really understand this, and we can help. In the links below, I'm going to include a link to a blog post that we did on how you kind of interpret the data out of the Office 365 console, so you'll want to check that out as well. So some of the challenges you're going to face that you're going to want to dig into in that data is, are subscriptions allocated to disabled users? Do you have unallocated subscriptions that don't have a user, things that aren't being used, dormant users, or have you got the wrong license type assigned to the wrong user? You want to get to the bottom of all of this before you negotiate. And again, mentioning our tool in terms of Certero and SAM Compass, we provide that complete visibility into this and give you the data you need so that you really, truly on that second deal can just buy what you need and not what you don't need. I want to go through a couple of case studies here in terms of some real life customers who've done some negotiating around these. So on my first case study, this organization had about 1,500 users. They were going through an EA renewal. Microsoft's positioning the Cloud Suite or E3, and they were considering a move to Exchange Online in 3 to 6 months. But there was really, they just kind of moved their desktops. There's really no plan to change anytime soon in terms of Windows 7, Office 2013. So the way this organization did is they developed that 3-person team, like I've defined, with IT, finance, and procurement in this case. And they had one person who really relished the role of being a bad cop in this area, kind of the good cop, bad cop, who consistently delivered a very hardline message to Microsoft in terms of, financial outcomes, things like that. And it was very effective in this case. They reviewed the usage of products so they could understand their future requirement. They really developed that realistic time frame. This was important. They spent a lot of time building out that model so that they understood exactly when they realistically could deploy. And they did reviews of click to run versus on-prem Office. They went back to Microsoft because Microsoft came to them with the standard bundles, and they wanted more options and a better deal. So what Microsoft came to them with was the first 3 options. You'll see this. You see Office 365, both device-based and a user-based option. And then also an ECS. And what they did instead was there was kind of a, they also wanted to, we and they requested to see some other things, which were just, an Office 365 add-ons. They maintained their perpetual rights when they moved to the cloud, so they didn't forfeit that. Some Exchange Online only for a subset of the users, and then a ramped role into Office 365. So what this did, when you kind of look at the value gap we've identified here, Microsoft's proposal was $1.746 million. At the end of the day, by the time we ramp this all in, we will do it for 1.2. So there's a value gap of about 30%. And that's what they wound up going with. And it improved their cash flow. They managed to keep their perpetual licenses as well. So they were able to kind of manage those licenses back and forth. And they had the option to come back if they needed to. In a lot of cases, if you don't clearly identify and articulate this, you will lose your perpetual rights as you move into the cloud. Here's another one where a Microsoft deal isn't really a deal. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen folks trying to put an early commit in place for you. And what you'll see is those early commits, they put a significant discount. But in this case, they put a substantial discount, but it required an 80% commitment to Office 365 E5. Did not include the core cal. And so what we did is we kind of looked at it and kind of modeled it out on a realistic rollout time frame, stepping up from E3 to E1 as E5 is consumed. So you can see, even though the deals, and I want to mention, those deals at MetrixData we put in place, those are at list price, no discount. They're all less expensive than the option that Microsoft put in place, which was heavily discounted, but that complete commitment day one. And you can see the cash flow model, how it doesn't make sense, but every single one of our models made more sense for this particular customer. The other thing I'll mention is, as I just started talking about discount, is with Microsoft, unlike a lot of your other vendors, discounting is really the last thing you should do. And by that, I don't mean don't go after discount, but it should be the last step in the process. Only after you've built the deal structure and you're comfortable with the deal structure and the product mix, and you've got everything else you need, all the concessions, then go after discount. Because you're not going to see the sorts of discounts that you see with vendors like Oracle, where you can get 50 to 70% off. That's just not how they operate. So just be aware of that and negotiate hard and go after discount right at the very end. Here's another case study I'll show you here. These folks are large manufacturer, global operations, multiple subsidiaries. They all had different technologies, roughly 7,000 employees, 8,400 computers, and their 3-year EA spend was about $12 million. So about 3 years ago, they decided to remove Office from their EA, and they're looking at a project to upgrade their collaborative platform. Looked like they were going to be 18 to 24 months to move to Exchange and SharePoint Online. And they also were kind of facing some challenges around the recent changes at the time from Microsoft, processor licensing to core license changes, and Windows servers were forcing some cost pressures onto the customers. They're moving to the new models. So what we did is we worked with them to demonstrate how to purchase Office 365 on a rollout plan that aligned to their project plan. Again, these folks built that deployment model that made sense and it was conservative. They went through a user profiling exercise. The manufacturer in their field, it was, you could identify factory workers and who needed to exchange online as opposed to, the full E5, E3. We went through a number of financial models to show the true cost to purchase versus upfront. We did some plans spent a lot of time working on the Windows Server optimization. And at the end of the day, really, we were able to complete this and save them over $3 million on that renewal. And this is really all around the structure of the deal. So I want to stress, a lot of this isn't possible without having the proper data. But hopefully this is giving you some ideas about how you can negotiate most effectively with Microsoft. So I've just put this up. This is how you can reach me. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. We'd be happy to have a quick call with you to either demonstrate our SAM Compass solution, or to frankly have just a discussion with you around negotiation or around audit defense. We're always happy to have a conversation, and we'd love to be able to help you. So just check out below. I'll put some links in the description below where there's some additional information, and hopefully we'll be talking soon. Thanks, and have a great day.